My name's Kevin Martin. I'm here with the Lake Erie Regional Grape Program, and I wanted to reach out to our audience today to talk a little bit about what's going on in the grape market and how we might be able to respond to conditions of the market. So we're into 2018 right now, starting to get ready for the spring season of the 2018 crop year, closing up 2017, and we've been in a period of distressed prices since for about 5 years now. And a few growers have reached out to me, and other members of our team have reached out to sort of come up with a tool that growers might be able to use to survive a long period of low prices. And to be honest, I think the research-based information that we have indicates that the best thing growers can do is to make vines as productive as they possibly can be, which is something growers typically try to do whether prices are low or high. There are a few random specific conditions and markets that may change those goals, but those are really few and far between, and we're talking about maybe 400 or 500 out of the 30,000 acres that we have. Everybody else is going to aim for the largest vines and the biggest crops that they can get. And to do that really does require investment, and in some ways is non-negotiable. But to the extent that we can sort of drill down into the budgets that growers have and save them some money over the short term, there are some things we can do, and I think that's what we want to talk about. So for instance, a typical vineyard has enough labor that is worth about $480. So a significant amount of that labor is unpaid labor. And as growers rearrange their business or have different strategies when you go from farm to farm, the actual amount of paid labor will vary by about $330 per acre. So of that 480, plus or minus 330 of that is unpaid. So that creates a great deal of flexibility in a grower's budget. So a total budget might look like $1,700 per acre. 330 of that could be unpaid labor, or it could be paid labor, depending on the strategies that the farmer implements. Basically, that boils down to doing renewal work with unpaid labor, doing pruning and piling with unpaid labor. All of those things are typically accomplished through mechanized assistance, and also there's a significant amount of labor during the season that is on most of our farms unpaid, but on a few of the larger farms paid. So spraying, fertilizer spreading, all of that can be unpaid labor, theoretically, depending on the size of the farm and the ability of the grower to manage all of that labor. The other thing that can happen with a budget is material costs can change, and I think in the past there's been a prioritization of materials, that, whether it be fungicides and fertilizers and what's more important and what's less important. But in my experience, the budget for materials should really be dictated based on the individual conditions on the ground. So, for example, I see some soil recommendations come through, and we're recommending something in the neighborhood of $230 per acre in materials. That being said, we've also seen soil recommendations come through that are less than $50 per acre. In general, with good, healthy soil, maintenance applications average about $75 based on current fertilizer prices per year, and that includes lime, it includes N, P, and K. It basically includes all your fertilizers. But that being said, I would say soil pH is probably the most popular thing to get behind on. You see a soil pH of 4, 4.5 with a relatively low buffer pH, and you could be spending $60 per year on lime for the next 10 years, so you're looking at $600, $700 over the next 10 years. Whereas another farmer who has a higher pH because somebody put lime on years and years ago may only spend $10 to $15 on average per year amending that soil to make sure the soil pH stays where it's supposed to be. The same can be said for N, P, and K, but to a lesser extent. Potash is going to be the next biggest thing, and while it is more expensive than lime per acre, when you do get behind, it is also going to be considerably more expensive per acre, even if you stay on top of it, because we haul a lot of potassium out of the vineyard through the grapes, which have a lot of potassium. So if you get behind, you might spend $85 or $90 on materials, and if you stay on top of things, you're probably still going to spend $40 unless you don't have much of a crop. So it's a lot less flexible than lime. Nitrogen, same kind of thing. At $40 a year on the higher end, it's going to be less expensive than lime, but on the lower end, at $10 per year or even less if you get ahead of things, we do see situations where we don't need any urea for a year. You could dwindle that all the way down to zero, but $12 is a typical maintenance application. So that flexibility in fertilizer, and this applies to fungicide materials and herbicide materials, it all depends on what you've done in the past. And, if you've been using Roundup over and over again, it's probably time to switch to a pre-emergent program for a year. That's going to cost you more. If you've been spending a lot on pre-emergent herbicides, it could be time to switch to a post-emergent program, and you could actually save $50, $60 an acre for a year or two. So this sort of flexibility really depends on the history of the farm and what the conditions are on the ground. And to try to prioritize what's most important across the region is a lot more difficult, because I'd probably say lime is the most important thing, but that's in the aggregate, and what the average represents is not what's happening on individual farms. So it is really difficult to come up with some numbers to reduce expenses below $1,100 an acre. But the good news is at $1,200 or $1,300 an acre, if we're growing very healthy vines, we can continue to break even at our lower prices for a long period of time. We haven't seen prices dip down below $150 a ton yet for most markets, so we are still in sustainable levels above $200 a ton. It may not feel sustainable for all growers, depending on the conditions, but I would say rest assured for some growers there is some profit to be had in that area, and certainly a long period of at least breaking even or approaching a break-even point. So we will not be seeing a lot of exodus from the market unless growers continue to lose marketing contracts. And in that area, we do see losses. If you don't have a market, there's not a really good solution to continue to produce Concord grapes at this point, unfortunately. So with that, if you have any questions about this, about exit strategies, about budgeting more specifically for an individual farm, hit us up in the comments or contact our office. Thanks a lot. Happy to be with you.